as you see, here, that card right there on the right, it says distorting the past. Can you see that one? Distorting the past does not change history. That's what it says right there. So I would like the great American people to actually think for themselves and contemplate what this distorting the past means. Because, telling the truth is something I take really seriously. And America is it's a country of democracy, I believe. And right here, violence against women cannot be ignored. Absolutely. I totally agree, sir. The kidnapped girls, 200 Nigerian girls in Nigeria by Boko Haram, that is a typical kidnapping and sexual slavery. And also the 3,500 Yazidi girls kidnapped in Syria by the IS, Islamic State militants. That is also a kidnapped sex slavery. And that is totally unacceptable in the world we live in today. There's no place for kidnapping sex slavery. That's the way I see it, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's go. I believe now in the 21st century, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have all sorts of social media, and that information war has already begun in this world. So my idea is that Japanese people in the 21st century should become more outspoken to something that is unjust, something undemocratic, and something that is simply not true. So instead of samurais used to use sword as the ultimate weapon, but my objective is, instead of a sword, it should be words, spoken verbal words, to understand the culture better and to refute any claims which is totally false.
I think there are some people who have at least seen the preview of your film.
Yes, and offended.
Yeah, and
yes,
so
that's a pity.
Yeah.
They only saw this, 8 to 10 minutes of the film, and there seems to be some evangelical feminists out there already protesting that this film is something like a neo-Nazi stuff, and that is totally ridiculous and baseless. They haven't even seen the whole film, and I heard that in some different classrooms there are strident activists setting up an event against this Washington State premiere, and I am. America is a democratic country. Everybody can express their views. There's no doubt about that. And I just want the American people to see my film today and decide with their own minds, instead of believing in everything depicted by Fox News. You will know what I mean when you see the film later on. I'll make a speech too.
Okay. I've done what I can to get a historical and political understanding of it, and try to get both sides of the issue. And
I hope
present a a fair do the same thing that you're trying to do. Make people decide for themselves.
Yeah. Impartial approach. That's all I'm asking for here. Good evening, America.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello. My name is Yujiro Taniyama, and I am a notorious neo-Nazi filmmaker, according to some strident feminists, activists, and intellectuals here in the United States of America. So it looks like I'm a very dangerous man, a neo-Nazi. I never knew that. So please be careful today. To begin with, I would like to thank the Central Washington University for giving me this rare opportunity to speak out today in the name of democracy. America is a democratic state. I would like to thank each and every one of you for participating in the premiere screening here in Washington State of my movie, Scottsboro Girls. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what I am going to talk about today, I'll be honest, may be a little unpopular among you great American people. But of course, that does not mean that I work for Al-Shabaab or Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram, or I'm anti-American. That is totally ridiculous. Actually, it is just the other way, the opposite. I respect the core American values, especially the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, freedom of speech
and freedom of expression. Despite the fact, unfortunately, I have learned that for the past few weeks, there has been some these evangelical, feminists, and unfortunate racist people who's been rallying to foil today's event, claiming that I'm some kind of a racist. I'm an ultra right-wing neo-Nazi. Whatever that means. And furthermore, one professor in this university, believe it or not, demanded to see this movie in advance. You know what this is, ladies and gentlemen? This is what you call censorship. Are we in Pyongyang, North Korea? Are we in Tibet or Beijing? That's where censorship takes place. Not here in the United States of America, which I adore. Because when we open the door to the censorship, we lose control of the truth. I'm sure about that. Therefore, I don't know how many of those biased people are here today, but I would just like to assert to those people, shame on you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, rather than anti-American, I am pro-American. I love the Seattle Mariners. I like Ichiro better though. Well, he's not there anymore. But this is my first visit to the Washington State. I also love Amazon.com from here. I flew on Boeing airplanes. I also love the Starbucks, the house blend. I drink it every morning in Tokyo. But I must admit that I do not love Mr. Bill Gates. I prefer Mr. Jobs better. He's got the edge. And to give you a quick reference to my background, I grew up in South Australia, Adelaide. City down south. And I went to elementary school there, and I did experience racial discrimination. That's back in the 1980s, because of the color of my skin. There was white supremacy in Australia back in the 80s. Some students would spit on my bicycle on the way to school, or some would even spit on my face because my face was flat, according to the other students. But to be honest, I have no grudge towards the Australian people today. I have many great Australian friends because we cannot cling on to the past forever, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to move on towards the future. Of course, we should learn from the past. But why do we learn from the past? To make this world a better place to live. And not to use the past for any sort of, to politicize a certain issue. I have flown 12,482 kilometers to meet each and every one of you today. That's about 7,756 miles, according to Google Maps. And in my dictionary, nobody flies 7,756 miles or more than 30 hours to cook up stories, or to falsify history, or whitewash the past, as some of those unfortunate feminist people have claimed. That I'm a neo-Nazi. I've got no time for that. I'm a busy man, just like each and every one of you. Here in the United States of America, I heard that unfortunately there have been some liars who loves to distort. Mr. Lance Armstrong lied about doping. NBC anchor Brian Williams, he lied that he was shot down in a helicopter in Iraq. And unfortunately, two white girls in the 1931 Scottsboro Boys case lied that they were raped by 9 black boys. I am here for a reason, ladies and gentlemen. Telling the truth is the bedrock of democracy. And telling the truth is the core of human rights. And telling the truth, I believe, is something that I take very, very seriously. As South Korea's Sejong University professor, her name is Miss Park Yoo-ha, she's asserted, quote, "The world has not been informed correctly regarding this controversial issue. That for the past 20 years, the Japanese government have repeatedly expressed remorse and apology towards the Korean conflict nearly half of the Korean comfort women have in fact accepted the apology, period. This truth is never reported on the BBC or any Western corporate media. Why? Because the Western corporate media have an agenda over this issue, to politicize this issue, to stir the tensions up between Tokyo and Seoul, because there's a profit motive behind it. There are people earning money from this unfortunate conflict woman issue. And as a man who takes this issue seriously, and as a man who takes telling the truth seriously, it is totally undemocratic and unacceptable. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the speech I would like to make today before I screen my film is crystal clear. 8 tips you need to know before you make your final decisions over this controversy. Of course, you don't have to take sides. I don't want you to take sides. But I hear the American people love taking sides. You know, New York Yankees, New York Mets, Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, Republicans or Democrats, Bill Gates or Jeb Bush, whatever. So if you are going to take sides, please do so after you hear my speech today. And one thing for sure, I am not here to stir up hatred between the nations. I think Tokyo and Seoul should enjoy top-notch relationships because we're neighbors. Tokyo and Seoul is like Mexico and Washington. We're next door neighbors. And it is totally counterproductive to stir up hatred just because of this contentious issue. Now, according to a British historian, he's a prodigious historian by the name of Anthony Beaver, his book called Berlin, The Downfall 1945. In this book, Beaver asserts that during World War II, at least 2 million German children and women were raped by the Red Soviet Army. 2 million, ladies and gentlemen. Aged from 8-year-old to 80-year-old German women were raped by the Red Soviet Army, the Russians. But my question here is, why do we know about it? I didn't know. I'm sure you guys didn't know either. Why? Why did the BBC ever report this 2 million rape of German children and women by the Russians? Why? Furthermore, why isn't there a single well-known documentary film about this 2 million rape of German children and women, as asserted by a prominent British historian, Anthony Beaver? Why? So what I would like to ask you tonight, again, is when you go home tonight, before you go to bed, please ask for yourselves, why don't we know about this 2 million rape? Whereas, when it comes to the comfort woman issue, man, the NYT or the BBC, they post articles every 5 seconds rebuking Tokyo. If you don't believe me, just Google comfort woman. See how many hits you get on Google. There are dozens. Or rebuking Japan. Now my question here is, what is the difference in the treatment between the Russians and the Japanese? Is it because the Soviets were on the victorious side during World War II and Japan was vanquished? Absolutely. It is so damn easy to bully Japan because we lost the war. Truth don't matter. It is soft journalism, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to see why I'm saying this later in the movie. It is simply easy to bully Japan. Otherwise, how can you explain the fact that everybody knows about this comfort woman issue, but nobody knows about this 2 million rape of German children and women by the Russians? Now, the first tip I would like you to know tonight regarding this contentious issue is 122, an irony. On June the 25th, 2014, 122 former comfort women for the US soldiers sued the Korean government for the US use of the comfort woman. I'm sure you didn't know this. And I must say that no media reports this. And it is a pure irony. It is a pure irony, ladies and gentlemen, that so-called the comfort stations and the comfort statues, are currently being built here in the United States of America. Do you know why? Because, unfortunately, I'll be straight and plain, unfortunately, it is the United States of America that has been the largest producer of comfort women since the beginning of the Cold War, 1945. According to MIT professor and an award-winning author, John Dowell, as soon as Japan surrendered in August 1945, the American victors came in, and the first thing that American soldiers did was to line up in comfort stations in Tokyo, Yokohama, Yokosuka, Osaka, Nagoya, everywhere across Japan, according to the MIT professor John Dowell. It is an untold history in the United States, isn't it? 12 million condoms were distributed to the US GIs through the comfort woman. 12 million condoms, ladies and gentlemen, were distributed to the US GIs. And according to John Dower, the Americans called this comfort station RAA, or Recreation or Amusement Association, virtually a brothel, a comfort station. John Dower also asserts that after Japan's surrender in August 1945, average of 40 Japanese women were raped by US GIs a day. 40 women a day. However, after RAA, or the comfort stations for the US soldiers, were shut down in 1946, average of 330 Japanese women were raped by US GIs a day, according to the MIT professor John Dower. This is an egregious violation of human rights, of course. So I would like to address to my fellow American people that this comfort woman issue is not only about Tokyo and Seoul anymore. It is about you and me, the Japanese people, the Korean people, and the great American people. Otherwise, why would 122 Korean comfort women for the US soldiers sue the Korean government on the 25th of June 2014? Next, let's take a look at South Korea, where 25,000 US soldiers are stationed today. According to the senior fellow at the famous Brookings Institute and the professor at the Wellesley College, her name is Miss Catherine Moon. She asserts in her book, Sex Among Allies, quote, at least 1 million Korean women have served as sex providers for the US military since the Korean War. That is 1950. And that these women were called comfort women. So there you go again. American GIs associated with the comfort woman, unfortunately. I am here to tell you the truth. Never reported it on your favorite Fox News, whether you believe it or not. And furthermore, the Brookings Institute senior fellow Catherine Moon asserts that in 1971, for the first time in history, the United States Forces Korea succeeded in pressuring the Korean government to implement strict and systematic VD checkups, venereal disease checkups, upon the comfort woman. This means that the United States Army was directly involved in the venereal disease checkups and partial management of the comfort woman, which is exactly what the Japanese Army was doing during World War II, venereal disease checkups and partial management of the comfort woman. A document found recently, a 1977 document signed by then South Korean President Park Chung-hee, who is the father of the incumbent president, Park Geun-hye. It clearly mentions there were 9,935 Korean comfort women serving the US soldiers in 62 countdown stations. I went to Korea, ladies and gentlemen, to film this movie. And boy, the remains of those brothels are still there even today. This is the reality we have to face and should never ignore. So first of all, I would just like to assert that this issue has entered a new stage. That the Korean comfort woman might sue not only the Korean government or the Japanese government, but Washington, D.C. Because there's a flow of information in the world we live today. The second tip I would like you to know about this issue is Ellensburg and a former comfort woman by the name of Miss Chang Chong-woo. The population here in Ellensburg is approximately 20,000. Is it correct? Approximately. This means half a woman. 10,000 beautiful women in this beautiful, beautiful city of Ellensburg. I've come here for the first time. It's a beautiful city. Now, 10,000 women in Ellensburg. The widespread assertion that there are 200,000 Korean comfort women kidnapped and enslaved by the Japanese army means the number of women 20 times larger than the woman population here in Ellensburg were kidnapped. That is huge, ladies and gentlemen. How many ballparks would you need, say, fulfilled? That's huge. If Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab comes to Ellensburg tomorrow morning and starts kidnapping 200,000 women, what would you guys do? You gentlemen, what would you guys do? Of course, you guys would go to Walmart, get a gun for $19.99, and start shooting back at the terrorists, wouldn't you? Otherwise, you'll be caught a cow or a chicken. However, the truth of history has revealed that during World War II, Korean men did not raise a single finger in resistance. Not a single finger. But they actually helped. That is why a prodigious professor from the Chicago University, Bruce Cummings, he has clearly mentioned in his book, Korea's Place in the Sun, page 179, that, quote, many Korean women were mobilized by Korean men, period. This means there are dozens of Korean middlemen or the pimps during the war or even before the war. And he's not the only one that's saying that. San Francisco State University professor, her name is Miss Sarah So. She's also asserted, quote, it is striking that according to the accounts of the survivors, Korean recruiters outnumbered the Japanese, period. Of course, because they spoke Korean. And it's not only her that's saying that. South Korea's distinguished Seoul University professor Ahn Yeon-jae, he's mentioned as follows. Please listen, this is important. Quote, Koreans made up more than half the people who recruited the Korean comfort women and ran the sex brothel business. Quote, this means, more than half means majority. Majority of the people who recruited Korean comfort women were Korean men, according to Chicago University professor, San Francisco State University professor, and Seoul University professor. Despite this truth, the fallacy is, no Western media ever reports this. That's one thing. And secondly, you go to some websites, those feminist activists who call me neo-Nazi, like Chong Dae-hyuk or these organizations. You go to their website, the Korean government's website. There mentions not a single word about these Korean recruiters. And you know what this is? Censorship, once again. And when we open the door to censorship, we lose control of the truth. There are people in this world who want you to hear only what they want you to hear. I presume many of you support Hillary Clinton here. I think she's a beautiful woman. She could become the next president. But I don't think many of you watch the Fox News because probably they might cook up some stories to bully her. Are they fair and balanced? We'll see. There is a Korean comfort woman, hardly known around the world today. Her name is Miss Chang Chong-woo, who was born in 1919. According to San Francisco State University, Sarah So's book, The Comfort Woman, Miss Chang Chong-woo was sold 2 times by her own Korean father. You know why? To pay back his debt and to build a house. Is this kidnapping by the Japanese army as known around the world today? Absolutely not. She was not a victim of forced prostitution, but she was a victim of the patriarchal society back in East Asia back then. Even in Japan too. Girls from rural areas were unfortunately sold by their own parents. The so-called women's rights did not exist back then. Of course, it was unfortunate, but that was the reality. Moreover, this former comfort, Miss Chang Chong-woo, she worked in the comfort stations for 9 years from 1936 in China, all of which were run by Korean brothel masters. According to San Francisco State University, Professor Sarah Solzberg, page 186. The third tip I would like you to learn German is a former comfort woman by the name of Miss Lee Young-soo. She is the most well-known comfort woman in the world today. She's like the Hillary Clinton for the Democrats. I heard that Miss Lee Young-soo actually visited here to the Central Washington University to deliver a speech that she was kidnapped by the Japanese army and forced into sexual slavery. If that is true, it is simply deplorable. I have sympathy towards Ms. Lee Young-soo because she lived in hard times. If I was in the same position or you were, I think we have had suffered hard times too, in a state of war. But that is not synonymous with saying that she can assert anything she wants or cook up stories in any way whatsoever, because that is misleading and confusing and complicated. I say so because do you know what Ms. Lee Young-soo said when she first came out in 1993, ladies and gentlemen? This is what she said in South Korea Survivor's Story, Volume 1. In the fall of 1944, I left home with my neighborhood friend, Poon-sun, without telling my mom. The recruiter showed me a pair of leather shoes and a red dress. I was so happy, I followed him readily, period. Is this kidnapping by the Japanese army? Honestly, I know you people are smart people. Is this kidnapping by the Japanese army? When she left home with her neighborhood friend Poon-sun without telling her mom. That's what she said in a published testimonial called the South Korea's Survivor's Story, Volume 1. So there you go. I think there are some Korean American students over there, probably activists, leaving the room because they do not want to hear the actual truth, the unfortunate side of the story. Unless the Koreans and Japanese both face the truth, we will never solve this issue. Those students leave this room when I convey the truth. And I have actual evidences. What I just said is clearly published on the South Korea Survival Story, Volume 1, 1993. And I'm not the only one that's saying that. San Francisco State University Professor Sarah So has asserted the same thing. That after her original story, Miss Lee Young-soo, who came here, starts to change her story. On the 17th of February 2004, on Korea's most leading newspaper, Chosun Ilbo, this is what she said. While I was asleep, a Japanese came, covered my mouth, and dragged me away and raped me. Beg your pardon me? This is totally contradictory to her original 1993 story, isn't it? She said she left home without telling her mom. And what's ridiculous, 3 years later, on the 15th of February 2007, Miss Lee Young-soo is somehow invited to the U.S. House of Representatives public hearing to testify. And she said the same thing. Totally different from her original story. And the New York Times reported the following month, introducing Ms. Lee Young-soo's quote in their conclusion of the article on March 6, 2007. Do you know how this article ends? It ends like this. Ms. Lee Young-soo, a South Korean comfort woman survivor. Ms. Lee Young-soo, while she was asleep, a Japanese army came in, covered her mouth so that she could not call on her mother. Period. Beg your pardon me. Not call on her mother? In her original story, what she said? In 1993, she said, I left home without telling my mother. So what New York Times depicting is a story totally different. This is a rubbish article of the New York Times. It is a garbage, baseless article. Then we're going to think for a moment. Why did Miss Lee Young-soo lie? There must be a reason. Absolutely. You'll see later in the film Scotts World, but there is the world's largest, in a way, the largest feminist organization called Chang Dae-hyuk, which was set up on November 16, 1990. She was pressured by Chang Dae-hyuk to lie. Otherwise, there's no other explanation. And there's been, you'll see later in the film, but there's been dozens of conformers who's been forced to lie by this Chang Dae-hyuk, which is the mastermind behind this issue and connected to those evangelical feminists who call me a neo-Nazi when I am here just to convey the truth in the name of democracy. But it is hardly known, ladies and gentlemen, that the leader of Chang Dae-hyuk, her name is Miss Yoon Mi-hyang, her husband had been arrested for espionage as a North Korean spy back in 1993. What does this mean? When the husband, the closest member of the leader of Chang Dae-hyuk, the most influential lobby group for the conformity, is a North Korean spy. North Korea is a country that don't give a shit about human rights. People there are eating shoes of mosquitoes. And here we have a lobby group that enjoys top-notch connections with North Korea. In 2012, Chang Dae-hyuk even received a Christmas card from North Korea. Precisely, it was a greetings card, claiming, "Let's fight with the Japanese invaders." That's in 2012. This is the kind of people we are dealing with here, never depicted on the Western mainstream media, unfortunately. The fourth tip I would like you to know, ladies and gentlemen, is Eamon Fingleton. He is the most influential figure in the Forbes magazine. On the 13th of April, 2014, Forbes magazine posted an article rebuking Tokyo once again, as always. I'm used to it. But when one smart reader questioned Mr. Fingleton, "Excuse me, sir, you are the contributor for the Forbes magazine, but do you know the fact that the Korean comfort women have been unfortunately never straight in their allegations, in their testimonies?" Now, this is what Eamon Fingleton answered in the comment. It is so hilarious I have it all in my head. Quote, "You imply that the Korean comfort women have repeatedly changed their stories. My understanding is that they have been completely consistent in their allegations. Please name a single comfort woman that have changed her story. Period." So here we go. The editor for the Forbes magazine, Eamon Fingleton, he doesn't even know the name Miss Lee Young-soo, the most famous comfort woman. This lady has been changing the story thousands of times, according to San Francisco State University Professor Sarah So, according to South Korea Sejong University Professor Park Hyung-ha, Tokyo Christian University Professor Stone Ishii. Everybody has totally questioned Miss Lee Young-soo's testimony because it's been changing so much. There are so many Korean comfort women that have been changing their story. You will see it later in the film. And now here we have, I have a proof here. Here we have the editor of the Forbes magazine, Eamon Fingleton. Here you go. So this is his comment. "Please name a single comfort woman who changed her story." This is an irrefutable proof of how he's never done his homework and writing articles. These are the kind of people who are writing the comfort woman articles in the Western corporate media today. These people are not serious about conveying the truth. So all I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, is if you are serious about the truth, unfortunately regarding this issue, Western media is ridiculously biased. Please go to Amazon.com and buy a book by San Francisco State University Professor Sarah So or South Korea's Sejong University Professor Park Hyung-ha. The fifth tip I would like you to know, ladies and gentlemen. We're halfway there. The fifth tip I would like you to know, ladies and gentlemen, is, were these women actually prostitutes or not? To be honest, I do not know, because I wasn't there at the time, and neither were you. We don't know whether Woody Allen actually raped his 7-year-old daughter, do we? Because we weren't there. But liberal media might jump down. She's a victim of rape by Woody Allen. I've never met Woody Allen, but I love his movies. Did he actually rape his 7-year-old daughter as asserted by the New York Times? I doubt it. I don't know. We cannot conclude by mere prediction because this is a human rights issue. But according to the U.S. official war report, as Mr. Mera had just shown previously, the U.S. official war report number 49, which was published on October 1st, 1944, clearly mentions, quote, "Comfort girls are nothing more than a prostitute or a professional camp follower." Your ancestors said that, ladies and gentlemen. American military said that in 1944. Furthermore, in 1994, the Dutch government officially announced that they regard the comfort system primarily as prostitution. We should not downplay these announcements by Dutch government. But it is never reported on the Western mainstream media because it will contradict to their article they have been writing for the past 20 years that it was the Japanese invaders. They are the bad guys. They owe every single responsibility in the kidnapping of 200,000 women, which is unfortunately very, very baseless. So, ladies and gentlemen, please understand the fact that when we talk about prostitutes, I seriously don't know whether they were prostitutes or not, but the American army back then did so. And to understand this issue better, I would like to introduce you two testimonies by the former comfort woman. A testimony you've never heard before. And I think this is a testimony you ought to know to impartially approach this issue. And my sympathy goes with the comfort woman. Because these women, some of them actually did laundry and cooking. Second comfort women, such as Miss Mook-Chu, even worked as a nurse. Some died in the battlefields. Of course, they were unfortunate people. However, it does not mean that they were 200,000 kidnapped sex slaves. So please listen. The first quote is by Miss Mook-Chu, former comfort woman from her 1996 book, When I Was a Comfort Woman in Burma. "Japanese soldiers enjoyed my singing. On my part, I was pleased to see the soldiers having a good time. Not just my sweetheart, Yamada Ichiro, but other soldiers as well comforted me. They would say, 'I know it's hard life here, but I hope you will survive it and return home safely and be a loving child to your parent.' There were many good ones among the Japanese soldiers, and they all had a hard time, and I felt sorry for them." This is a confession by former Korean comfort woman, Miss Mook-Chu. And just one more confession by former Korean comfort woman, never told in the Western mainstream media. I think you can grab the bigger picture of this issue. This is from a 1999 film called Silence Broken by an American filmmaker, Kim Gibson, I'm sorry. Her name is Miss Pei Chok-kan, a Korean comfort woman. So this is her confession in the interview in this film. "We were also soldiers. We were not prostitutes. We helped the soldiers to fight. Do you understand? You do know why the women were taken, don't you? If the men couldn't do that thing, they couldn't fight. That's why we were also soldiers. Do I think what Japan did was evil? Not really. After all, Japan was at war. They wanted to win the war. They could not have done it without doing evil things. And actually, I blame Korea most. The fact that our country was weak. Were we a strong country, it would not and could not have happened. So if I am to blame anybody, it is Korea. You keep pushing me to say that Japan was wrong. But I still say they did it for their country, and we let it happen to us because we were not powerful enough, but we should never, ever let it happen again." This is the testimony by Ms. Pei Chok-kan, and this is also printed in San Francisco State University professor Sarah Soul's book, The Comfort Woman, page 190. Now, 3 tips to go. As Mr. Mera explained, there were isolated cases of forced prostitution in Java, Dutch East Indies, present-day Indonesia. Now, the Dutch comfort woman and the Korean comfort woman are totally different by nature. That is one thing you must know to understand this issue, ladies and gentlemen. One comes from Mars and one comes from Venus. When we hear Dutch comfort woman, you Google Dutch comfort woman, the first name that pops up, her name is Miss Jan Ruth O'Hearn. Indeed, she was a victim of forced prostitution. From February 1944 to April 1944. It was an egregious violation of human rights. And as a Japanese citizen, I truly apologize to her. But you got to bear in mind, remember, the Dutch official 1994 report clearly mentions, quote, the Dutch government recognizes the comfort system primarily as prostitution, period. This is the official view by the Dutch government. If you don't believe me, please go to the nearest Dutch embassy and ask. Which means Miss Jan Ruth O'Hearn's case, a victim of forced prostitution, was an extremely rare case. It was an isolated case. Otherwise, why would the Dutch government mention that in 1994 that they regard comfort system primarily as prostitution? It doesn't make sense. However, we've got to also understand that this Dutch report mentions that there are over 200 to 300 Dutch comfort women in total. So 300 Dutch comfort women in Indonesia today. And that at least 65 Dutch women were forced into prostitution. That's what this report says. So we can understand, out of the 300 Dutch comfort women, 250 approximately were Dutch prostitutes. Approximately 50 were forced into prostitution. But 250 of the Dutch comfort women in Java back then during World War II were prostitutes. Otherwise, why would the Dutch government official report in 1994 describe the comfort system primarily as prostitution? Dutch knows what prostitution is all about because they have the world's most famous red light district today in Amsterdam. And they describe the comfort system primarily as prostitution. On the contrary, the Korean comfort woman. Do you remember the first comfort woman, Miss Chan Chong-woo, who was sold twice by her own father to pay back his debt and to build a house? This is totally different from the Miss Jan Ruth O'Hearn's case. She was sold by her own father due to the patriarchal system in Korea back then. It was not kidnapping by the Japanese army. How about Miss Lee Young-soo? When she first came out in 1993, original story, printed on South Korea's Survivor Story Volume 1. This is what she said. I ran away from home with my neighborhood friend Tong-sung without telling my mom. Was this kidnapping by the Japanese? No, I don't think so. But why didn't she tell her mom? Because she knew that she was doing something wrong, probably. Otherwise, a normal girl would tell her mom when she's running away from home, wouldn't she? The U.S. Human Trafficking Report, 2014, it clearly depicts that 200,000 Korean girls run away from home annually and are subjected to prostitution. That's what it says on the U.S. Human Trafficking Report 2014. So unfortunately, it seems in Korea today, women's rights are in a way exploited even now in the 21st century. So I just would like you to know, ladies and gentlemen, to solve this issue and to understand the issue, we're going to understand that the Dutch comfort woman and the Korean comfort woman are totally different. However, your politicians, the great American politicians, were totally complicated and misunderstood this issue when they invited 3 comfort women to the U.S. House of Representatives public hearing on February the 15th, 2007, inviting 3 comfort women. One was Miss Jan Ruth O'Hearn, undoubtedly a victim of forced prostitution. I apologize for that. Other 2 were Miss Lee Young-soo and also one more, Miss Kim Kun-ja. They were both Korean. We know about Miss Lee Young-soo. But how about Miss Kim Kun-ja? When Miss Kim Kun-ja first came out as Congresswoman in 1999, this is what she said. I was sold by my foster father. In 2003, she said, I hate my father more than the Japanese military. Probably because her father treated her like a toy. However, when she comes to this beautiful US soil, this is what she said. I was captured by the Japanese at a railway station. Is this kidnapping by the Japanese army? So we are talking about Lance Armstrong here, ladies and gentlemen. I've never met him, but there are people who are shamelessly dishonest and mislead the whole issue. I am here to pave a path to, create friendship between Japan and Korea. In Korean, 친구 means friendship. That is all I'm asking for. But there are people who are controlled by this evangelical feminist organization like Chung Dae-hyun, forcing people like poor little grandmas like Miss Kim Kun-ja or Miss Lee Young-soo to lie. Because it is a profit motive, it is a business for them now to bully Japan. Truth don't matter. And the Western corporate media, unfortunately, like the Fox News, are totally jumping on the vehicle. And I do not think that is a smart idea. The last two tips, let's go quick. The seventh tip I would like you to know, I'll be quick, is Vietnam War. According to former US colonel, his name is David Hackworth, in his book About Face, it mentions that he encouraged prostitution in the compound where he commanded during the Vietnam War. This is one irrefutable evidence that proves that the US boys were involved or associated with the comfort women or the Vietnamese prostitutes during the Vietnam War. Even AP correspondent Peter Arnett, he's mentioned, the one quick routine was $2 for the GIs, and then it was quick. Have the US government ever apologized to the Vietnamese people? I've never heard of it. The French were the same. They had comfort station called the BMC, Brothel Mobile Campaign. They had it since World War I, when Vietnam was still a colony of France. They had it in World War II and Indochina War until 1954. They even imported Algerian women to work as prostitutes in the front lines. Have the French ever apologized to the Algerians or the Vietnamese? I have never heard of it. So we got to understand that this issue, the military prostitutes, unfortunately exists in this world today, the world's oldest profession. Now, the last tip I would like you to know, sorry for taking up your time, I'll be really quick. The last tip I would like you to know is Amanda Knox, the United Nations and Lance Armstrong. If Amanda Knox from Seattle is a victim of a botched investigation by the Italian judicial system, then Japan is a victim of a botched investigation by the United Nations. Because you know what? The widespread allegation that the 200,000 sex slaves existed during World War II, it roots to one UN report in 1996, published on the 4th of January by a Sri Lankan woman by the name of Kumaraswamy. This report was decisive to spread so-called the false sex slaves narrative. But it is hardly known around the world today that this Kumaraswamy report, or UN report 1996, was written based on a bunch of lies. It was written based on one book, written by a Japanese communist called Seiji Yoshida in 1983. This man who turned out to be a crook or a phony, he jumped down that he kidnapped 205 women in 9 days in Jeju Island down south of South Korea in 9 days. If that was actually true, this is an egregious violation of human rights, a crime. Then, when a lady by the name of Miss Ho Young-sun, a journalist for the Jeju newspaper, went to those places where he had confessed he had kidnapped 205 women, along with a local historian, and verified it. It turned out that there were not a single witness who had actually witnessed these 205 kidnappings. In a small island of Jeju, if 205 women are kidnapped, there should be at least one witness. There were none. That is why, on the 14th of August 1989, Korea's Jeju newspaper concluded that this Yoshida's book, 1983 book, is nothing but a lie. So since then, nobody has relied on this 1983 lie book as a primary source. From San Francisco State University Professor Saraswat, she said this book is totally discredited. That was the same with Tokyo Christian University Professor Stone Nisha, but everybody knows this is a lie. But the United Nations 1996 report used this lie as evidence of the truth. You know what this means, ladies and gentlemen? It is totally a rubbish report by the United Nations, because this lady, Kumaraswamy, according to the San Francisco State University Professor Saraswat, all she wanted to do is to redefine the military prostitute system into sexual slavery system. She had her own agenda. She was not serious about telling the truth. If you are going to write a graduation thesis, ladies and gentlemen, I know that you don't write graduation thesis, right? If you're going to write a graduation thesis based on Lance Armstrong's book, do you think you'll get credit for that? A graduation thesis called Victory, My Road to Victory. I don't think your professors would give you credit because Lance Armstrong is a phony. He's a liar. That is exactly the same with the United Nations 1996 report. So that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. 8 tips I would like you to know before you take sides over this controversial issue. And in conclusion, I would like to say that now in the 21st century, sexual violence towards women is totally unacceptable. Emancipation from dishonesty and hypocrisy is imminent. We need that emancipation. And to conclude my speech, I would like to introduce you a verse from the Bible. It is a verse from the Bible, chapter 8, John, verse 32. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Thank you very much, and God bless America. Thank you.